Just took a bit longer to find my way home. Chapter 3. Run, boy, run. He has been in the doctor's grasp for 6 long months. Each day proved to be worse than the last. It had started off slow. At first, it was just stamina exercises, running until his legs ache, his lungs burn, and sweat covers every inch of his skin. Then it was to see if he could break his speed record. The doctor had tried to see if he could reach the speed of a sonic boom. He had come close. His current record was 627 miles per hour. Then the test started getting worse. The doctor then wanted to test how quickly his body healed wounds, then how quick his metabolism was, then how much natural electricity his body could emit caused by his speed, then the amount of power he created from the electricity he produced, and it just kept on going. There was never any anesthesia for his procedures, never any painkillers for after. His meals were small and pitiful, even worse than when he had been living off of people's garbage. His only comfort was the time when he was alone in his cell, where he could talk to himself, cry and sleep without the fear of being poked or prodded or hurt. Sometimes he dreamed that he was back at Donut Lord and Pretzel Lady's house, where they had stayed. Sometimes in the dreams, they would invite him into their home, and he would watch movies with them, share meals together, would go to school, play baseball, make friends. And then he would wake up, reminded of where he was, and that they were not here, wherever here was. Sometimes he dreamt of Longclaw, and sometimes his dreams and reality blurred. He would hallucinate, just a bit, and never for more than 10 minutes at a time. He would talk to Longclaw, apologize, and sob, and beg for her to come help him, and she would do the same thing every time, gently rub a feathered appendage on his head, and say in that smooth voice of hers,
"Oh, Sonic, you deserve to be here. At least you won't hurt anybody when you're locked up."
And then she would fade away. He would talk to Pretzel Lady and Donut Lord about everything and nothing, from what the doctor had him doing for the day, to a crazy dream he had, to things he missed when he was free. And then eventually, they would leave too, and he would be all alone once again. The sound of the door hissing broke Sonic out of his thoughts. He looked up and watched as Stone approached. Sonic perked up, hoping the man had brought some food. His stomach was practically eating away at itself. But seeing as the man didn't have anything with him and no robotic worker following him inside, his hopes for food were squashed.
The doctor wants to see if you can break your speed record today.
Sonic perked up at that. Speed days were good days. While they usually left him sore and aching, it meant that he would be able to clean himself up, eat and drink more than he was usually given, and have any wounds that had been patched up, bandaged and wrapped. He watched as Stone grabbed onto the shackles and led him out of his room and to the infirmary. Robotnik had a lot of robots doing a lot of the work. He only observed and carried out the tests. Besides Stone, he was the only other human in the entire building. Sonic wondered if anybody was aware of what Robotnik was doing to him. They arrived at the infirmary. Like all doors in the facility, they were opened by biometric scan, either by hand, fingerprint, or retinal scan. He patiently waited for Stone to open the door before he was let inside. He was sat on an operating table while a robotic nurse approached and scanned him for injuries. The nurse gave him the all clear and Stone set before him a tray. It wasn't anything special, just a plain stew and a cup of what was most likely slightly contaminated water. The stew had no flavor to it, but it was very filling. Sonic quickly drained the bowl and cup of water before he was led out once again. They entered a different room. Robotnik was waiting behind the glass wall that separated the control room from the experimental area. Sonic got onto the machine. It was like a treadmill of sorts. Stone took off the restraints and he walked out, joining Robotnik in the control room. Sonic began to stretch a bit, warming up his muscles before the inevitable happened. He waited for Robotnik to talk, beginning the test. Finally, the sounds of Robotnik's voice coming through the speakers pierced the quiet. Sonic barely paid attention as the doctor continued to prattle his usual mumbo-jumbo. Finally, the sound of the speaker feedback brought him back to the present.
Subject 1991, begin.
The hum of the machine alerted him to start, and he began to run. His speed kept on increasing. He watched the screen in front of him. It was constantly measuring his speed. He was currently at 286 miles per hour. He could do better than that. This was the only thing he would consider fun. He could run, and he was constantly trying to beat his high score. It was a game of sorts. He began to push faster. It reached 300, and the number kept on climbing.
Subject has reached the halfway mark.
Robotnik announced as Sonic reached 375 miles per hour, and the number continued to climb. He began to feel the first twinges of pain in his muscles, but he kept on going. He went past 400 miles per hour. He began taking in bigger breaths to fill his lungs. Sweat began to form and roll down his face. He reached 500, and the number kept on climbing, and so did the burn.
Subject has reached about 3/4 of the way.
Robotnik declared as Sonic surpassed 563 miles per hour. Blue lightning began to shoot off of his body as he reached 600 miles per hour. He was so close to being his high score. He just had a little bit left to go. The lightning grew in size as he reached 650. He panted and wheezed as he went faster and faster. His now blue eyes kept on glancing back and forth from the screen to where Robotnik was watching as he got closer and closer to his record speed. Sonic watched as the number slowly climbed up as he tried to increase his speed faster and faster. He was so close. 679, 680, 681, 682, 683, 684, 685. His lungs burned and his legs were begging him to take a break, but he didn't stop. He kept on running.
Come on, Sonic!
686, 687, 688, 689, 690. Sonic knew he had passed his original record, that he was going to keep on going. He could feel himself getting faster. Robotnik had gone silent as Sonic kept on running. He was always running so he wouldn't get caught. Yet here he was, stuck in the same building for the past 6 months. Robotnik had confiscated his backpack. His rings were there, his map. He was supposed to be on the Mushroom Planet. Yet here he was, still stuck on Earth, and acting as some mad scientist guinea pig. He was a failure. He was always messing up. And he continued to run faster as he reached 700 miles per hour. He wished Longpaw was here. He wished Jonah Lord Pizza Lady had never left Green Hills. He wished to not be alone. He wanted friends. He wanted a family. And he wanted to feel safe. Instead, he was here, trapped, alone. And he kept on running as he surpassed 730 miles per hour. And the number kept on climbing as his frustration and sorrow were instead channeled into gaining speed. The number on the screen in front of him was climbing faster and faster. The same feeling that filled him that same day he realized Donovan and Pizza Lady weren't coming back began to fill his entire being. The lightning began to grow. The sparks were turning into cobalt bolts of pure energy, and he just continued to push. An idea formed in his mind. Sonic had never tried a full-fledged escape attempt. Security was too tight. Trying to escape was near impossible when robotic guards were roaming everywhere. Security cameras were placed at every corner of the hallways, and always no more than a few feet away from each other, constantly surveying everything. But as the energy surrounding his body began to increase with his speed, the first spark of hope he had felt in months began to form and burn brightly in his chest. He just hoped he could pull this off. He reached 800 miles per hour. A loud thundering sound began to echo all around him as a sonic boom exploded in the area. He winced as the sound blew out his ears, but he kept going. His energy was only getting stronger. He let out a cry as he felt all of his energy leave him at once. A shockwave similar to the one he had created 6 months ago exploded throughout the lab, and all the power went out, drowning the building in darkness. He just hoped he had controlled himself enough to not mess anything up again. Sonic fell off the treadmill like a machine. His lungs and legs burned. He was exhausted. But as the light his body emitted began to dwindle, he realized he had a chance to escape as Robotnik quickly demanded Stone to try and get the power back on. The Cobalt's blue finally faded. Sonic couldn't help but smirk to himself as he snuck around the destroyed lab. He had better night vision than the two, so it wasn't long before he found the lab door. It was shut tight. He looked around, hoping to find an air vent before the doctor found him.
Get back here, rodent!
Robotnik shouted. Sonic swallowed back a fearful gasp. He looked to his left and up, noticing a vent. He moved quickly and quietly, and he jumped, ignoring the way his legs felt like they were seconds away from falling off. He grabbed onto a pipe that stuck out of the wall. He grabbed onto the grate of the vent and pushed up. He quickly climbed in and closed the vent just as Robotnik walked underneath.
The longer you stay hidden, the longer you'll be under the scalpel.
Robotnik threatened. Sonic winced and quickly began to crawl away. He didn't know which way he was going. He just hoped he would find an exit. His entire body shook. Eventually, his legs and arms gave out underneath him, and he resorted to crawling on his belly. He took a quick break here and there to catch his breath and give his trembling limbs a second to rest before going back to crawling. Sonic looked up just ahead. There was light. He hadn't seen sunlight in what felt like forever. A burst of energy surged through him as he inched closer and closer to the light. There was a large vent leading outside. He quickly pushed it open and jumped out. He collapsed to his knees. The sun blinded him. He blinked back the colorful dots in his vision before fully getting a good look. He couldn't help but gasp. The sky was awash with a pastel blue and deep purples and oranges as the sun began to make its descent. Sand and rocks surrounded him. He was in some sort of desert, but he didn't care. He was finally free. Tears rolled down his cheeks and he let out a sob, hugging himself and lowering his head. His body shook and the adrenaline slowly began to wear off. Not good. The pain was getting worse, and his thirst and hunger were beginning to make itself known. But he didn't have time. Robotnik would get the power back on soon, and he needed to run. But first, he needed to get the tracker off. He knew Robotnik had planted it somewhere deep in the quills on his head. He quickly began to brush his gloved fingers through his quills. He froze as he felt something stuck in between two spines. He let out a small noise of triumph before he began pulling at it. It took a few sharp tugs, but he eventually pulled it out of his spines and threw it into the sand, just as the lights of the facility began to come back to life. Adrenaline coursed through his veins once more. He had to leave. Now, so with a burst of energy, he ran as fast as he could, leaving nothing but a thunderous clap and blue lightning in his wake before they too eventually faded away. He was fading fast. His legs were on fire. His muscles began to twist and cramp. His lungs ached. It felt as if he had inhaled red-hot coal. He had never pushed himself so hard in his life as he continued to run and run. He didn't even know where he was going, but not in a straight line. He couldn't let the doctor track him. He wasn't going to make it easy. The problem, though, was that he didn't know where Green Hills was. In fact, he had multiple problems at the moment. His rings were still in Robotnik's possession, his body was beginning to tire out, and he had no idea where he could go. He wasn't safe. As he began to slow down, the area around him also began to take form. As he began to slow down, the area around him began to... Instead of colorful streaks in the peripherals in front of his vision, he could now see a car heading straight toward him. He let out a yelp of surprise and quickly steered himself to the left and out of the road. He hid behind a large dumpster as he finally regained his breath. He slowly peeked out from his hiding spot and felt his heart drop. How had he ended up in this huge city? He had to be miles away from Green Hills. But was it even safe to go back? Where did he go now? He was scared. He took a few deep breaths. He had to remain calm. The last thing he needed was to emotionally blow up again and cause another disaster. He got up and held back a pained gasp as his entire body protested. He held onto the side of a wall and leaned against it for support. He just had to keep running. Montclair said to never stop running. He was good at running. He could do that. And so, sticking to the shadows and darker alleys of whatever city he was in, he began to move. But it wasn't long before his exhaustion and pain finally caught up to him, and he loudly collapsed behind someone's garbage. He couldn't help but wince.
Nobody heard that, right?
Was the last thing he mumbled to himself before he finally fell unconscious and into the peaceful realm of sleep.